Was 5 years old when she discovered that music could make people cry. Not sad tears. The kind of tears that come when something touches you so deep you don't even know why you're crying. She was sitting on her grandmother's porch, humming a tune she had heard on the radio, and her grandmother just stopped rocking in her chair and looked at her with wet eyes. "Child," her grandmother said, "you got something special in that voice. Don't you ever let nobody take that from you." Didn't fully understand what that meant back then. She was just a little girl who liked to sing. But those words stayed with her, tucked away in her heart like a secret promise. Growing up wasn't easy. Her family didn't have much. Her father worked at a factory that made car parts, and her mother cleaned houses for people on the wealthy side of town. They lived in a small house with thin walls and a leaky roof that her father kept patching with whatever materials he could find. But there was always music. Her mother would hum while she cooked. Her father would whistle old songs while fixing things around the house, and would sing. She sang while doing homework. She sang while washing dishes. She sang herself to sleep at night. School was a different story. Was quiet, the kind of girl who sat in the back of the classroom and didn't raise her hand much. She wasn't shy exactly, but she felt like she didn't quite fit in anywhere. The popular kids had nice clothes and went on vacations during summer, wore hand-me-downs, and spent her summers helping her mother with cleaning jobs. She learned early that some people looked at you different when they knew you didn't have money. So she kept her head down and focused on getting through each day. But music class was the one place where came alive. When she sang, something shifted in the room. Even the kids who usually made fun of her would go quiet. Her music teacher, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes, once told her she had a gift that couldn't be taught. She encouraged to audition for the school choir, and for a brief moment felt like maybe she belonged somewhere. She made it into the choir, but she never got the solos. Those went to girls with louder voices and parents who showed up to every school event with cameras and donations, watched from the back row, singing harmony, wondering if anyone could even hear her voice among all the others. When she was 16, her grandmother passed away. It broke something inside. Her grandmother had been her biggest believer, the one person who always told her that her voice mattered. Now that voice was gone and felt more alone than ever. She stopped singing for a while. Months went by where she couldn't even hum a tune without feeling like she might fall apart. It was during this dark time that she wrote her first song. She didn't plan to. She was just sitting in her room one night, unable to sleep, and the words started coming. They poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. She wrote about loss, about feeling invisible, about holding on to hope even when everything felt hopeless. When she finished, she read the words back to herself and realized she had created something real, something true. She didn't show it to anyone. It felt too personal, too raw, but she kept writing. Song after song, filling up notebooks with lyrics and melodies that only she would ever hear. Music became her diary, her therapy, her secret world. After high school, there was no money for college. Got a job at a diner on the edge of town. The pay was bad and the hours were long, but she needed to help her family. Her father's health had started failing and the medical bills were piling up. So she put on her apron, tied back her hair, and learned how to smile at customers even when her feet ached and her heart felt heavy. The diner was busy most days. Truckers passing through, families grabbing a quick meal, lonely people who just wanted someone to refill their coffee and maybe say a kind word. Became good at reading people. She could tell who wanted to talk and who wanted to be left alone. She learned that everyone carried their own pain, their own story. And sometimes, a simple smile or a moment of connection could make someone's day a little better. At night after her shift ended, would go home and sit in her tiny bedroom with a second-hand guitar she had bought at a pawn shop. She taught herself to play by watching videos on her phone. Her fingers blistered at first, but she kept going. She started recording covers of popular songs and uploading them to the internet, using her phone propped up against a stack of books. The lighting was bad. The sound quality was worse, but she did it anyway. The views were low. Sometimes only a handful of people watched. The comments, when they came, were mostly from strangers saying nice things like pretty voice or keep going. But there were also mean ones. People who told her she wasn't good enough. People who said she should give up. People who mocked her cheap setup and her simple bedroom background. It hurt more than she expected. Every negative comment felt like a punch to the gut. There were nights when she almost deleted everything and quit. What was the point? She was just a girl from nowhere, singing into her phone, hoping someone would care. The world was full of talented people with better equipment, better connections, better everything. Who was she to think she could compete? But then she would remember her grandmother's words. That voice in her memory, telling her not to let anyone take her gift away, and she would pick up her guitar again. 3 years passed like this. 3 years of working double shifts, coming home exhausted, and still finding the energy to create music that almost no one heard. 3 years of hoping that maybe one day something would change. Her following grew slowly, painfully slowly. A few hundred followers, then 1,000. Small numbers that meant everything to her because each one was a real person who chose to listen. One evening, while scrolling through her phone during a break at work, saw an advertisement for a national songwriting competition. The grand prize was a recording contract and a chance to perform at a major music festival. The entry fee was $200. That was a lot of money for her, almost a week's worth of tips. She stared at the screen for a long time. Part of her said it was a waste. She had no training, no fancy demo, no connections in the music industry. She would be competing against people who had been groomed for this their whole lives, people with vocal coaches and professional recordings and management teams. What chance did she have? But another part of her, the part that still believed in her grandmother's words, whispered something different. What if this was her moment? What if she didn't take the chance and spent the rest of her life wondering what could have been? She thought about the song she had written all those years ago, the one about loss and hope. She had never performed it for anyone. It was too personal, too close to her heart. But maybe that was exactly why it needed to be heard. Maybe the world needed songs that were real, not polished and perfect, but raw and true. Before she could talk herself out of it, paid the entry fee. She recorded her song on her phone, uploaded it to the competition portal, and pressed submit before she could change her mind. Then she went back to work, refilled coffee cups, and tried not to think about what she had just done. Somewhere across the country, a panel of judges received her submission. They looked at her application. No formal training, no industry experience, no social media presence worth mentioning. Just a girl from a small town with a homemade recording and a dream. They placed her file at the bottom of the pile. To them, she was nobody, and nobodies didn't win competitions like this. But didn't know that yet. For the first time in years, she let herself feel something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The letter came 3 weeks later. Had almost forgotten about the competition. She had convinced herself that she wouldn't even make it past the first round of selections, that her recording was probably sitting in some digital folder that nobody would ever open. So when she saw the email with the competition's logo, her hand started shaking before she even clicked on it. She had been selected for the preliminary round, live auditions, in person, in a city 4 hours away. Read the email 5 times to make sure she wasn't imagining things. They wanted her to come and perform. Her song had made it through somehow. Out of thousands of entries, she had been chosen to move forward. For a moment, she let herself feel excited. Then reality set in. The audition was on a Wednesday. She would have to take the day off work, which meant losing a full day of tips. She would need money for gas, maybe a motel if the auditions ran late. She would need something decent to wear. All of this cost money she didn't really have. But she had come too far to stop now. She picked up extra shifts for the next 2 weeks. She smiled through the exhaustion, pocketed every tip, and saved every dollar she could. Her mother noticed something was different and asked what was going on. When told her about the competition, her mother got quiet for a moment. Then she went to her bedroom and came back with a small envelope. Inside was $80, money her mother had been saving for emergencies. "Mama, I can't take this," said. Her mother pressed the envelope into her hands. "Baby, this is an emergency. This is your dream. You go show them what you got." Hugged her mother tight and promised she would make her proud. The morning of the audition, she woke up before sunrise. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of everything that could go wrong. What if she forgot the lyrics? What if her voice cracked? What if she got there and realized she didn't belong? She pushed the thoughts away and got dressed. She had found a simple black dress at a thrift store, nothing fancy, but it fit well and made her feel like she could be someone. She tied her hair back, put on the small gold earrings her grandmother had left her, and looked at herself in the mirror. "You can do this," she whispered, but her reflection didn't look convinced. The drive felt endless. Watched the small towns blur past her window, each mile taking her further from everything familiar. She played her song on repeat in her head, mouthing the words, trying to calm her nerves. By the time she reached the city, her stomach was in knots. The audition venue was a large auditorium attached to a fancy hotel. Had never been anywhere like it. The lobby had marble floors and chandeliers, and people walking around like they owned the place. She felt immediately out of place, like everyone could tell just by looking at her that she didn't belong there. She checked in at the registration desk and received a number to pin on her dress. 47. She was contestant number 47. The woman at the desk barely looked at her, just handed over the paper and called for the next person in line. Found a seat in the waiting area and looked around. The other contestants were everywhere, warming up their voices, stretching, talking to people who looked like managers or coaches. One girl was doing vocal exercises with a woman who kept adjusting her posture and giving instructions. Another guy was surrounded by a small team, someone fixing his hair while someone else handed him water. These people had support, they had preparation, they had money. Had a thrift store dress and a crumpled paper with lyrics she had written in her bedroom. She tried not to stare, but it was hard. Everyone looked so polished, so confident. They moved through the space like they had done this 100 times before. Meanwhile, sat alone, clutching her bag, feeling smaller by the minute. A girl about her age sat down nearby. She had perfect makeup and an outfit that probably cost more than made in a month. She glanced then at her dress, and her expression shifted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "First time?" the girl asked. Nodded. "Good luck," the girl said, but the way she said it didn't sound like she meant it. It sounded like she already knew how this would end. Hours passed. Contestant after contestant was called into the auditorium. Could hear muffled music through the doors, applause, sometimes cheering. Each time someone came out, they were either beaming with confidence or trying to hide their disappointment. There was no in-between. Finally, her number was called. 47, you're up. Stood on legs that felt like they might give out. She walked through the heavy doors and into the auditorium. The space was huge, much bigger than she had imagined. Rows of empty seats stretched back into darkness, and at the front, behind a long table, sat the judges. 4 of them. Important-looking people with serious faces and papers in front of them. A woman with a clipboard directed to stand on a mark at center stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding. She couldn't see the judges clearly, just shapes behind that table. "Name?" one of them asked, sounding bored. She said, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. There was a pause. Then she heard one of the judges say something to another, too low for her to catch. A small laugh followed. Her face grew hot. "Whenever you're ready," another judge said. Took a breath. She looked out into the darkness where the audience would have been if this were a real show. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about all those nights singing alone in her room. She thought about how far she had come just to stand on this stage. She opened her mouth to sing. and her voice cracked on the very first note. It was like her throat had forgotten how to work. The sound that came out was thin, shaky, nothing like the voice she knew she had. She saw one of the judges glance at his phone. Another wrote something down on her scorecard. They had already decided. Pushed through. She found her footing somewhere in the second verse, her voice steadying, the emotion starting to come through. The song was about her grandmother, about losing someone who believed in you, about trying to keep going when everything felt impossible. She meant every word. She felt every word. But the damage was done. By the time she reached the chorus, she could tell no one was really listening anymore. The judges were looking at their papers, at each other, anywhere but at her. She was just another forgettable contestant, another name they would cross off their list. She finished the song. The last note hung in the air for a moment, then disappeared into silence. A few seconds of nothing. Then one of the judges cleared his throat. "Thank you, we'll be in touch." That was it, no feedback, no encouragement, just a dismissal wrapped in polite words. Walked off the stage feeling like she was moving through water. Everything seemed slow and heavy. She pushed through the doors, past the other contestants still waiting, past the registration desk, past the fancy lobby with its marble floors and chandeliers. She made it outside before the tears came. She found a bench near the parking lot and sat down, unable to hold it in anymore. All those years of hopping, all those nights of singing into her phone, all the money she had scraped together, all for this. A cracked note in a room full of people who couldn't wait for her to finish. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe some dreams weren't meant for people like her. She sat there for a long time, watching cars pull in and out of the parking lot, watching other contestants leave the building laughing and celebrating. The sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but couldn't appreciate it. She just felt empty. She didn't know that someone had been watching from the back of that auditorium. She didn't know that while the judges were checking their phones and writing her off, one person had been leaning forward in his seat, listening to every word she sang. She didn't know that her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Didn't know how long she had been sitting on that bench. The sun had dipped lower, the sky turning from orange to a soft purple. The tears had stopped, but the heaviness in her chest remained. She felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside her and taken something important. She should get up. She should walk to her car and drive the 4 hours back home. She should return to her life at the diner, to the early mornings and the tired feet and the customers who never remembered her name. That was her reality. This competition, this dream of being something more, had been a fantasy, and fantasies always ended. She was about to stand when she heard footsteps approaching. Slow, unhurried footsteps on the concrete. She didn't look up. She didn't want anyone to see her face, puffy from crying, mascara probably smeared under her eyes. She just wanted to disappear. The footsteps stopped nearby. "That was your song, wasn't it? The one you sang in there." The voice was calm, deep, belonging to someone older. Finally looked up. A man stood a few feet away. He looked to be in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with gray hair and a weathered face that had seen a lot of life. He was dressed simply, jeans and a button-down shirt, nothing flashy. He didn't look like the other people inside with their expensive clothes and important attitudes. He looked like someone's uncle, someone who might sit on a porch and tell stories about the old days. Wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "Excuse me." "The song," he repeated. "You wrote it yourself, didn't you?" She nodded, not sure what else to say. Maybe he was just being kind. Maybe he felt sorry for her. She braced herself for some gentle words of encouragement, the kind people offer when they don't know what else to say. But he didn't say anything like that. Instead, he sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving space between them, and looked out at the parking lot like he had all the time in the world. "I've been in the music business for over 30 years, he said. "I've worked with singers who sold millions of records. I've sat in rooms with people who are considered legends, and you know what I've learned. Shook her head. Technique can be taught, stage presence can be learned, but truth, he turned to look at her. You can't teach someone how to be honest. Either they have it or they don't, and most people don't. Didn't understand where this was going. I messed up in there, she said. My voice cracked. They stopped listening before I even got to the chorus. I know, he said. I was there back row, I saw the whole thing. Her stomach dropped. Great. So he had witnessed her humiliation firsthand. Those judges, he continued, they're looking for something specific, someone who fits a mold, someone they can package and sell without too much effort. They hear a cracked note and they move on. They don't have time to dig deeper. He paused, letting the words settle. But I'm not a judge. I'm just an old man who still believes that music should mean something. And when you sang that song, even with the shaky start, even with the nerves, I heard something I haven't heard in a long time. Felt her throat tighten. What did you hear? The truth, he said simply. You weren't performing. You were telling me something real, about loss, about holding on when everything wants you to let go. That song came from somewhere deep inside you and it showed. No one had ever talked to her like this about her music. No one had ever looked past the mistakes to see what she was actually trying to say. She felt tears threatening to return, but she held them back. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. I lost. They're going to pick someone else, someone with a perfect voice and a perfect look and a perfect everything. That's how these things work. The man smiled, but there was something sad in it. You're right. That is how these things usually work. The industry loves perfection. They love shiny packages, and most of the time that's what wins. He leaned forward slightly. But here's the thing about perfection. It's boring. It doesn't stay with you. You hear a perfect song and you forget it 5 minutes later. But a song that's real, a song that makes you feel something, that's the kind of song that changes people's lives. Really looked at him for the first time. There was kindness in his eyes, but also something sharp. Experience. Wisdom earned through years of seeing how the world worked. Why are you telling me this? She asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple business card. He held it out to her. Because I think you have something special. And I'd hate to see it go to waste because a few judges couldn't hear past one cracked note. She took the card. It had his name, a phone number, and 2 words underneath, music producer. I have a small studio, he said. Nothing fancy, but the sound is good. I'm offering you 3 months. Come work with me. Let me help you develop your voice, your songs, your confidence. No contracts, no promises, just hard work and honesty. Stared at the card, her mind spinning. This didn't make sense. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Strangers didn't just appear and offer opportunities out of nowhere. Why, she asked again, you don't even know me. He stood up from the bench and looked down at her with a gentle expression. 30 years ago, I was sitting on a bench just like this one. Different city, different competition, same feeling. I had just been told I wasn't good enough, that my songs were too different, too raw, too unmarketable. I was ready to give up and go back to and forget the whole thing. He paused. And then a stranger sat down next to me and said something I never forgot. He said that the music industry is full of people who will tell you no, but all it takes is one person to say yes, one person who sees what you really are. He became my mentor. He changed my life, and I've spent the last 30 years trying to pay that forward. Felt the tears finally spill over, but she didn't try to hide them this time. I don't have money, she said. I can barely afford gas to get here. I can't pay for studio time or lessons or any of that. He waved his hand dismissively. I didn't say anything about money. I said hard work and honesty. You show up, you put in the effort, you stay true to who you are. That's all I ask. She looked at the card again. The setting sun caught it just right, making the simple white paper seem almost golden. This was crazy. She had a job back home, responsibilities, a life that didn't include running off to work with some stranger she had just met on a bench. What would her mother say? What if this was all some kind of trick or false hope that would leave her even more broken than before? But then she thought about her grandmother, about those words spoken on the porch so many years ago. Don't ever let nobody take that from you. And she thought about the alternative, going home, giving up, spending the rest of her life wondering what might have happened if she had just been brave enough to try. She stood up from the bench and faced the man who had given her something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Okay, she said, her voice still shaky but growing stronger. I'll do it. He smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that reached his eyes. Good, he said, then let's get to work. He turned and started walking toward the parking lot, watched him for a moment, still half believing this was some kind of dream. Then she folded the business card carefully, tucked it into her pocket, and followed. She didn't know what the next 3 months would bring. She didn't know if this would lead anywhere or if she would end up right back where she started. But for the first time since she walked off that stage, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't finished yet. Maybe the best part was still to come. The studio was nothing like had imagined. When she thought of recording studios, she pictured sleek buildings with glass walls and expensive equipment everywhere. She pictured famous people walking through hallways, assistants running around with coffee cups, and engineers sitting behind massive soundboards covered in buttons and lights. This wasn't that. The studio was in the back of an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The building looked abandoned from the outside, with faded paint and windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. Almost drove past it twice before she spotted the small handwritten sign that said Studio B, with an arrow pointing toward a side door. She parked her car and sat there for a moment, second-guessing everything. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should turn around and go home before she embarrassed herself even more. But she had made a promise, to herself, to her grandmother's memory, to the man who had seen something in her when no one else did. She got out of the car and walked to the door. Inside, the building transformed. The hallway was simple but clean, leading to a room filled with instruments, microphones, and recording equipment that looked well used but carefully maintained. There were posters on the walls of artists didn't recognize, black and white photos of people playing guitars and singing into old-fashioned microphones. It felt like a place where music lived and breathed. The producer was sitting at a small desk, writing something in a notebook. He looked up when she walked in and smiled that same warm smile from the bench. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He nodded like that answer meant something to him. "Good, then let's begin." The first few weeks were harder than anything had ever done. She thought she knew how to sing. She had been singing her whole life, but she quickly learned there was a difference between singing and really understanding your voice. The producer didn't just teach her technique. He taught her how to breathe, how to stand, how to connect every word to a feeling inside her body. He made her sing scales until her throat ached. He made her hold notes until she thought her lungs would burst. He recorded her voice and played it back, pointing out things she had never noticed before. The way she rushed certain phrases, the way she swallowed some words, the way fear crept into her tone when she reached for high notes. "Your voice is an instrument," he told her one afternoon, "but you've been playing it with the brakes on. You're holding back because you're afraid of what people will think. You need to let go of that." Letting go was easier said than done. Had spent her whole life being careful, staying quiet, not taking up too much space. She didn't know how to be loud. She didn't know how to demand attention. Every time she tried, something inside her pulled back. But slowly, day by day, session by session, things started to shift. The producer was patient. He never yelled, never criticized her harshly. When she made mistakes, he simply asked her to try again. When she got frustrated, he told her stories about other artists who had struggled before they broke through. He reminded her that growth was never a straight line. There would be good days and bad days, and the only thing that mattered was showing up for both. Kept showing up. She rented a tiny room in a boarding house near the studio so she wouldn't have to drive 4 hours every day. She called her mother every night to check in, and her mother always asked the same question. "Are you taking care of yourself?" Always said yes, even when she was exhausted and sore and wondering if any of this would matter. Somewhere around the 6th week, something clicked. She was working on her song, the one she had written after her grandmother died. They had been rebuilding it piece by piece, changing the arrangement, adding new layers while keeping the raw emotion at the center. She had sung it hundreds of times by now, so many times that the words had started to feel automatic. But this time was different. She closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother, not the sad ending but the good parts, the porch, the rocking chair, the way her grandmother's hands felt when they held hers, the way she always smelled like lavender and old books, the way she believed in when no one else did. And then she sang. Not perfectly, not technically flawless, but honestly, completely. Every word came from somewhere deep, a place she usually kept hidden from the world. She forgot about the microphone. She forgot about the producer watching from behind the glass. She forgot about the judges who had dismissed her and the people who had told her she wasn't good enough. She just sang. When she finished, she opened her eyes. The producer was standing very still, his hand resting on the soundboard. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "That's it," he finally said, his voice quiet. "That's what I heard on that stage. That's what we've been working toward." Felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. She didn't feel embarrassed this time. She felt proud. They spent the next few weeks perfecting the recording. The producer brought in a friend who played piano and another who added soft strings in the background. They kept the production simple, letting his voice carry the song. Nothing fancy, nothing overproduced, just truth wrapped in melody. When it was finished, they sat together and listened to the final version. Couldn't believe that voice was hers. It sounded like someone who had lived, who had lost, who had kept going anyway. It sounded real. "What happens now?" she asked. The producer leaned back in his chair. "Now we put it out into the world and see what happens." There was no marketing team, no publicity campaign, no record label pushing it to radio stations. They simply uploaded the song to streaming platforms with a simple title and a short description. A song about loss, hope, and the people who believe in us. Went back to her room that night feeling strangely peaceful. She had done everything she could. The rest was out of her hands. The first day, nothing much happened. A few dozen streams. A handful of comments from strangers saying nice things. Tried not to check her phone too often, but she couldn't help it. On the second day, something shifted. A woman in another state had lost her mother 6 months ago. She had been struggling with grief, unable to find the words to express how she felt. She stumbled across song by accident, pressed play, and burst into tears before the first chorus ended. She shared it on her social media with a message. "This song saved me today." That post got shared, and shared again. A soldier stationed overseas heard the song and played it for his unit. He said it reminded him of home, of the people waiting for him, of why he kept going through the hard days. He sent a message she would keep forever. A late-night radio host discovered the song and played it during his show. He called it one of the most honest pieces of music he had heard in years. His listeners flooded the streaming platforms looking for it. By the end of the first week, the song had been streamed hundreds of thousands of times. By the end of the second week, it crossed 1 million. Comments poured in from all over the world. People shared their stories of loss and hope, of grandmothers and mothers and friends they missed. They thanked for putting into words what they couldn't express themselves. The song climbed the charts. Not because of a marketing budget or industry connections, but because real people connected with it and passed it along to other real people. It was the kind of success that couldn't be manufactured. It had to be earned. By the end of the month, his song reached #1. She was sitting in that same small studio when she found out. The producer showed her on his phone a simple chart with her name at the top. She stared at it for a long time, unable to speak. "How do you feel?" he asked. Thought about the diner, the double shifts, the bedroom recordings that no one watched, the cracked note on that stage, the bench where she almost gave up. "Like my grandmother is somewhere smiling," she said. The producer nodded. "I think she probably is." The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Was sitting in the studio, working on new material, when her phone buzzed with an email. She almost ignored it. Her inbox had been flooded lately with messages from labels, managers, journalists, and strangers who all wanted something from her. She had learned to be careful about what she opened. But the subject line caught her eye. It was from the competition. The same competition that had dismissed her a year ago, the same stage where her voice had cracked and the judges had stopped listening. They were inviting her back. Not as a contestant this time, as the guest performer for next year's finals. Read the email 3 times. They wanted her to stand on that stage and sing for the new batch of hopefuls. They wanted to celebrate her success, to show everyone what was possible. The email was full of warm words and compliments, calling her an inspiration, a true talent, a star who had risen against all odds. She didn't know how to feel. Part of her wanted to say no. That place held painful memories. The cracked note, the smirking judges, the walk of shame through the lobby, the bench where she had cried alone. Going back meant facing all of that again. But another part of her thought about the contestants who would be there. The unknown singers with big dreams and small chances. The ones sitting in waiting areas right now, surrounded by polished competitors with coaches and teams, feeling like they didn't belong. The ones who would crack under pressure and walk off stage believing their dreams were over. Those people needed to see someone like her. Someone who had failed publicly and kept going anyway. Someone who proved that one bad moment didn't have to be the end. She called the producer and told him about the invitation. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I think I need to go back," she said. "Not for them, for the people who feel like I felt." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That sounds like exactly the right reason." The day of the finals arrived faster than expected. She made the same drive she had made a year ago, watching the same small towns blur past her window, but everything felt different now. She wasn't the scared girl clutching handwritten lyrics anymore. She was someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side. The venue looked the same. The fancy hotel, the marble lobby, the chandeliers, but this time when walked in, people recognized her. Staff members smiled and waved. A young woman at the registration desk asked for a photo. A security guard told her how much his daughter loved her song. It was surreal. A year ago she had been invisible here. Now she was the reason people had come. She was escorted to a private dressing room backstage. There were flowers waiting for her, and a gift basket, and a card signed by the event organizers thanking her for coming. She sat down in front of the mirror and looked at her reflection. The same face, the same eyes, but something behind them had changed. She had changed. A knock came at the door. One of the production assistants told her it was almost time and led her toward the stage entrance. As she walked through the backstage area, she passed the waiting room where the contestants sat. She paused and looked in. They were just like she remembered, nervous faces, expensive outfits mixed with thrift store finds, some surrounded by support teams, others sitting alone. She saw a young woman in the corner clutching a folder of lyrics, looking like she might be sick. That had been once. Their eyes met. The young woman's face shifted from nervousness to recognition. Her mouth fell open slightly. Smiled at her and mouthed 2 words, You've got this." The young woman's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Sometimes that was all someone needed, a moment of belief from someone who understood. Continued toward the stage. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled. The energy in the room buzzed with excitement and tension. The finals were about to begin, and soon one of those nervous contestants would be crowned the winner. But first, the audience would hear from last year's unexpected success story. The host was a polished man in an expensive suit. He took the stage and began his introduction, talking about journeys and dreams and the power of music to change lives. He told a brief version of story: the small town, the diner job, the competition entry that almost didn't happen, the audition that went wrong, the song that touched millions. "Please welcome to the stage," he said, his voice rising, the voice that proved everyone wrong. The applause was deafening. Walked out under the lights, the same lights that had blinded her a year ago, that had made her feel small and exposed, but now they felt warm, welcoming, like they had been waiting for her to return. She looked out at the audience, thousands of faces looking back at her. In the front row sat the judges, the same judges who had checked their phones while she sang, the same judges who had written her off before she finished her first verse. They were smiling now, clapping politely, acting like they had believed in her all along. Felt something shift inside her, not anger, not resentment, just clarity. She stepped up to the microphone and waited for the applause to fade. "A year ago," she began, her voice steady, "I stood on this stage and my voice cracked on the first note. The judges stopped listening. I walked out of here believing my dream was dead. I sat on a bench in the parking lot and cried until I had nothing left." The room went quiet. No one had expected her to start like this. "I thought that was the end of my story, but it wasn't. It was just a chapter, a hard chapter, the kind that makes you want to close the book and never open it again. But I kept going, not because I was brave, not because I was confident, but because someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." She glanced toward the back of the auditorium, where the producer was standing in the shadows, watching. He gave her a small nod. "Tonight, I'm not here to show off how far I've come. I'm here for every person in that waiting room backstage, every person who feels like they don't belong, every person who's about to walk out under these lights with shaking hands and a racing heart, terrified of messing up." She paused, letting the words settle. "I want you to know something. The people who judge you, the ones who decide in 30 seconds whether you're worth their time, they don't get to write your story. You do. And if you fail tonight, if your voice cracks or you forget your words or everything goes wrong, that doesn't mean it's over. It means you're human. It means you're trying. And that's worth more than any trophy." The audience was silent, could feel the weight of every eye on her, but she wasn't afraid anymore. "They told me my song wasn't ready," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "But the truth is, they weren't ready for my song." She nodded to the band behind her, and the music began. She sang the same song she had sung a year ago, the song about loss and hope, the song about her grandmother. But this time her voice didn't crack. This time every note landed exactly where it was supposed to. This time the room hung on every word. When she finished, the silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then the audience erupted. People stood from their seats. The applause rolled over her like a wave, warm and overwhelming. She saw tears in the crowd. She saw the judges clapping harder than anyone, trying to pretend they had always known. But wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the young woman she had seen backstage, now standing in the wings, watching with wide eyes and a spark of something new in her expression. Hope. The same hope had almost lost on that bench a year ago. The same hope that a stranger had given back to her. She smiled at the young woman one more time. Then she took a bow and walked off the stage, leaving the lights behind. Her story wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about showing one simple truth. Some dreams don't need permission. They just need someone brave enough to keep believing. And sometimes that someone is you.